All right, guys. Welcome back. EYL, we are in Los Angeles.
An amazing LA time has been had.
Every time we come to LA, especially for Grammy weekend, it's always a motion picture event for sure.
To say the least, man. To say the least. It's definitely a motion picture, and we're going out with a bang.
It's not over yet.
Not over.
Yes. So this is interesting. I think the first time that we met was with Baron Davis, briefly, for his event, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
That was All-Star?
All-Star in Utah.
Salt Lake City?
Yeah. We were on a panel together.
We were, yeah.
Yeah.
And then we met in Davos.
And then we met in Davos.
Yeah. You know what they were saying? Like, you got to meet this guy. You got to meet this guy. And I'm looking like, all right, who's the guy? I'm like, oh, Ryan. Yeah, we know Ryan. We've been trying to make it happen for probably over a year.
Yeah.
But like any other, when time's supposed to come, it does, and it happens in the right time.
Seriously.
So we ran into a Davos, and it was love, and it was like, we have to do it now.
Like, now's the time.
Now's the time.
Here we are, 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
So Ryan Breslow is founder and chairman of Bolt, which is revolutionizing e-commerce, one-click checkout. You said PayPal 2.0.
Yep.
You could look at it as that, right?
Yeah, I think that's the easiest way to describe it.
But you're a serial entrepreneur, so you also started a company called Love.
Yep.
Right, that's the newest vibe that you got going on, right?
Yeah.
And that's a marketplace for alternative medicines?
It's a little different now.
Okay.
I think the last time I told you about it, it was.
Okay.
But it's actually even crazier idea. I was trying to tell Troy at Davos, and
I said, don't tell me.
Yeah, you're like, don't tell me. So I didn't update you or correct you.
Yeah.
So it's different than that.
All right, so we'll get into it.
Yeah.
And then you have Eco, right?
Yep.
And that's the crypto savings app?
Yeah, crypto savings app and making crypto easier for the mainstream consumer.
Yeah, I feel like that's been your goal. When I think about like the history of how you've built everything, it started there, right? Like it was, how do I make things more efficient for the everyday person? Even like the one-click payment is, how do I make things efficient for the everyday person?
Exactly. Yeah. How do you make things easy that currently aren't easy?
Yeah.
And I felt that about online checkout. I felt that about crypto, and those. And now it's Love, which is all about conscious shopping and making that easier, which we'll talk more about. But yeah, making things easier.
Yeah.
So Forbes, last year, 2023, they had you as the 7th youngest billionaire in the world. That's what Forbes said.
Those guys. You know what was also interesting? If you ever like Google yourself, which maybe you don't, when people have like their birth date, your birth date says 29-30. So they're not really sure how old you are, I guess.
Yeah, there's all types of media, press, a lot of things that are said.
This is a real enigma.
Yeah.
I got a lot of attention maybe 18 to 24 months ago because I needed to make Bolt and myself known to just get customers. So I started doing more publicly, and then Forbes came out with that, and there's a bunch of other stuff in the press, and I realized that the press attention comes with a lot of costs. So I've been trying to, stay more low profile these days. I'm not going completely low profile, doing,
Don't worry, nobody's listening. All right, well, first and foremost, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
And no, thanks for having me. It's an honor.
Yeah, no. So I think this is going to be a dope conversation. We want to talk about raising money. We want to talk about business startups. We want to talk about pivoting, all of these things that we talk about as far as entrepreneurship, and that's what the platform is based on. So we actually just got finished watching one of your videos for like 20 minutes in the studio. I told you about it. So that actually gave me a lot of questions to ask based off of that conversation. So
yeah, and I think there's a part of the world of business and entrepreneurship that people don't talk about, but I love that you do, and that's the mindfulness. Right, and the mental health of it, right? Because there's a lot that comes on, number one, being a founder, but having the risk to say, I'm about to change the world.
Yep.
And having that belief in yourself, but sometimes realizing that the people around you don't have a similar belief.
Yeah, I mean, I think the world's greatest entrepreneurs had a deep sense of purpose. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs do. And then as you get caught up in business, you start to lose that why, right? And it can really suck the soul out of you, to a point where you're forgetting why you're doing what you're doing in the first place. And so you kind of hit a glass ceiling. And I think re-anchoring in that why and staying there as much as you can is what leads to that continue success, continue reinventing of yourself, as we talked about. So, yeah.
So let's get into this. So let's talk about Bolt. We'll start there. So what's the idea for Bolt, and what's the from idea to execution to getting it unicorn status?
Yeah. So I started this. I was lucky to get into Stanford, grew up in Miami. I'll go through this a little background. Started a Stanford Bitcoin group in 2013. There were 8 of us on campus.
A Bitcoin like investing group?
No, it was just like students doing research and projects around Bitcoin. We were writing papers, we had some professors, we'd get credits for researching Bitcoin. And super cool. Most of the campus didn't know what Bitcoin was. There were 8 of us in it. A couple years after, it was hundreds and hundreds of kids. But we were the first ones to really popularize Bitcoin on campus. And I dropped out of school to start something that looked kind of like a Coinbase, like make it easy to buy and sell and all of that. And I actually went around the country pitching banks on why they should work with us, because we need a bank to work with us. And so did that for about a year. We lost a couple banking bids to Coinbase because they had the bigger VCs. They felt more trusted with them. So I'm like, this is going to take me too long to get banks behind me. And so like I kind of really have always wanted to build a better PayPal. Like if I do this, I can integrate crypto with it later. And so I had this idea of PayPal 2.0. I'd started some e-commerce sites in middle school. And I'm like, the checkout is really bad. And so I was like, why don't we make a better version of this? And I could talk more about how Bolt works, but that's was the inspiration.
Where did you, because this is early. I know now everybody, Bitcoin, I mean, if you don't know what it is, it's like, where have you been? But in 2013, it wasn't very commonly known. I kind of was introduced to it because of the music scene. And it was like, that was a way to get music from sites that, you know, it's almost like illegal to get music. So you had to have a different form of payment. How did you get introduced to it and then now bring it to Stanford to say, this is something that's going to take over the future?
Yeah, there was this professor, his name was Balaji Srinivasan, who's kind of infamous in Silicon Valley. And so he was teaching this startup engineering class. So I'm very lucky.
He's the one that like always, he teaches classes and then the kids that in his class pitch and then he invests in the kids' ideas.
Yeah. He like in the class, you work on different projects and hackathons. He might invest, might not. I wasn't centered around him investing, but I got very lucky. Right place, right time. I was very blessed to get into a great school, and then there was about 8 of us who would do these hackathons. He'd have twice a week hackathons because Balaji loved like, you know, young hackers building his crazy ideas. So we'd go and we'd build his things. And there were about 8 of us who were consistently there till like 5 or 6 in the morning. And you know, everyone else went to bed. And so we just started talking and we get a lot of time with him. And then eventually the 8 of us were like, we should just form an official club on campus. And this should be around Bitcoin. So we started a Stanford Bitcoin group. We got it blessed by the university. We ended up getting like 5 credits a quarter for doing research papers on it. So we got out of some classes and just was able to focus on Bitcoin. And eventually I was like, this is all I want to focus on. And then I ended up doing the stereotypical dropout, Stanford dropout. So I'm the stereotype to a T.
So when you start in a company, you have to raise money, you have to like get some help. Like what's the process of actually starting the company of, you know, from idea to actually getting it up and running?
Yeah, I mean, there's a million ways to start a company. For me, I I had like a first attempt at starting a company and it ended up complete disaster. I had two other co-founders. One was a close friend. One was like this billionaire who got interested in what we were doing. Had all this money lined up because of this person's name. That person ended up pulling out for reasons I never was able to uncover. My other co-founders like, this is hopeless. I had already dropped out of school, so now I had no money. I had no co-founders, but I'm dropped out. And so now I look at them like that was such a blessing because they weren't the right people to do the business with. But at the time, I was like, man, I'm super screwed. I just dropped out of school, got no money, can't pay for rent. I mean, I don't have investors. So, I built an MVP of an app over several months, built it myself. I then had enough momentum. I got some users on the app. It was a crypto app, kind of like a Coinbase, where some investors, took notice. I was pitching tons of investors. I got a lot of no's, and then I refigured out how to pitch. And so I got better. I could talk for 5 hours on fundraising strategy, but I started to get some investors on board. Then you start to hire engineers that are better than you. And then, you start to get customers. We went through some pivots. It was really messy. It's just extreme perseverance. Sometimes the funding comes first. Sometimes the talent comes first. Sometimes the customers come first. Both early days were not pretty at all. I mean, it was trying a lot of different things.
So are these things all self-taught, right? Because I'm thinking this is this young man, North Miami, who's coding in 8th grade, which is like incredible. But most times there's a difference, right? There's a difference between being the CEO of a company and being an engineer or a coder, and then somebody who actually raised money for that company, right? That pitches. So how are you learning those skills? How are you developing them outside of just saying, they told me no, all right, I can't do that? Like what was the strategies when you were early on trying to get this money from people?
Yeah, well, the first thing is I got started young in terms of being able to talk to business people. I started building websites, doing online marketing, found some customers in Miami, was doing this in high school. So by the time I got to college, I had some business experience, not in tech, but, I had some experience. When I started raising money, I was doing everything wrong. Like one of the first rules that I say in my book, Fundraising, is don't say you're fundraising. Because the second you say that you're fundraising, you're on the clock, meaning people are going to be like, all right, well, his round should blow up and be over soon because if this is a hot company, I'm going to have a limited window. So if in 2 weeks your round isn't done, people are going to be like, why aren't others investing? And so they're going to walk away. And if you build up a bunch of no's around your company, people are not investing, then that's, the network becomes aware that all these people didn't invest and you're kind of screwed. Mm-hmm. So, one of the first lessons that I learned from a great mentor of mine, his name is Michael Carter. He has this company, Playco, very successful gaming company. He was giving some talks on fundraising, and he taught me this concept: just don't say you're fundraising. Just go build relationships first. Go and meet investors and get them excited about who you are as a person, and casually get them excited about your idea. Mm-hmm. Instead of going and saying, I'm pitching you, which automatically puts them on a pedestal versus you, right? You're not peers anymore. Now they're on a pedestal. And so it sets the dynamics incorrectly from the beginning. You're not building a relationship, and you can get this domino effect of no's, which could really screw you before you even begin. So I did that in the beginning. I learned from those mistakes. I had some great mentors who helped me reshape my fundraising strategy.
So you said something I heard you say where you said, if you want money, ask for advice. If you want advice, ask for money.
Yep.
That's how I said it correctly.
Yeah.
So can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, it's a pretty common adage in Silicon Valley. And so I certainly didn't invent that. But if you go to someone and you say, hey, I want, to pitch you for funding, they're most likely going to give you advice. It's going to say, hey, I'm not able to fund you right now, but how about I give you some advice? Whereas if you go to them and you show a genuine interest in their advice, but also potentially even more importantly, you really impress the shit out of them with who you are, and that person has money or is an investor, they are going to organically want to invest in you.
So let's say I have a company and I'm trying to raise money and I know a very wealthy guy. Instead of saying, hey, do you want to, hear my pitch to give me money for my startup? It would say, I have this idea, and I really respect your opinion. Would you want to just hear about it just to kind of give me some feedback on it?
Exactly.
Then you just do a really great job presenting it. And then they're like, damn, I got to be involved in this situation. But you don't look like you're so eager to just only get their money. You really genuinely want their advice, but then by you not wanting to take their money, they want to give you money even more.
Exactly. This approach is a win-win. Makes it more comfortable for them, right? Because they don't like saying no to you. It makes it more comfortable for you. Because if you're doing a good job, they're going to want to invest. If you're talking to an investor whose job it is to invest, who invests, they need you just as much as you need them. So if you're sitting in front of them and they're like, oh shit, this dude is going to fucking kill it, they will proactively say, how can I get involved? And they're going to be just as likely, if not more likely, than if you came to them explicitly trying to pitch.
How intentional are you about it? Before you even go to get the advice, are you strategically targeting the people that you want to get the advice from? Like, is there a list? And it's like, if I could meet or get in front of this 10 or 20 people this month, that's my target. Like, how did you go about it?
Well, in the beginning, beggars can't be choosers, right? So you kind of will try to get meetings with anyone who has money, right? I mean, now you could be, as you go later stage, you could be a little more picky. And you should be picky. I mean, you should try to avoid putting sharks on your cap table who are at odds with you or who are very short-termistic and they're going to create issues for you. You should avoid those to the maximum extent possible. But, what I would do is I would try to build my network in a very strategic way. So I would host happy hours or dinners. I do this on a college budget. I mean, I spent minimal money on it. It's like a couple $100 that I'd throw together. After a few, this VC would sponsor them. So they'd throw down $300-400 on these dinners, right? And be at my place or, I didn't spend a lot of money. And so I was building network. So first step is build network of people who have interconnectivity to investors and play the long game, build a relationship with these folks. Casually make sure all these people in your network are impressed by you, right? Casually. And then at some point you can make the ask. Or you can say, hey, I know this person invests in your company. I think they have this relevant experience to what I'm doing. Do you mind making the intro? And so you do that with, all founder friends, people who raise money before. You're trying to build this network to cultivate and then eventually make the ask for the introductions. And, you're just doing this on repeat as much as possible.
So you said something also where it's like you always want to avoid trying to get a no.
Yes, you never want to get a no. This is a little bit of the opposite advice that some would give you. Oh, you want to get to know quickly.
Yeah, because that's what I've heard.
99 no.
Because I come from sales, so that's what I heard all the time was like, a no is one step quicker to a yes, or get to the no early, or stuff like. But so that's interesting.
Even if it feels contradictory, it's like because you go. This is trial, right? Like you're saying this because you've got no's.
Yeah, exactly. No's spread. So investor community or the community you're raising within is small, and so you don't want somebody to go to someone you just pitched and that person be like, I passed, right? Now, if you follow this strategy, you may have had a meeting with that person. It may not have went well, so they may not have invested, but you were never pitching them. So they don't have the ability to say, I passed, because you never went to them officially asking them for money.
No, it actually makes a lot of sense psychologically, because like you said, it becomes a virus. Once one person says no and then another person asks this person, even if they want to say yes, it's like, well, why'd you say no, right? Bingo. And then it's like, I don't want to be the person that says yes and be an idiot when my friend, who I have a high level of respect for, said no. So I'm more likely to lean towards the no because that's just where the crowd is going.
Exactly. And so what you're trying to create is a crowd momentum behind you. The hardest one to get to fall is the first one. And you have to get this person to fall just through your character and your pitch and this strategy that I'm outlining. And then that one will hopefully turn to 2 or 3. Once you have like 3 people is the magic number, where 3 people have now casually, without you saying you're fundraising, have told you they want to get behind you. Now you can start a fundraising round with the wind at your back. Because you could say, the way I like to sequence it generally is even when these people say, I want to back you, I won't say, okay, how much? Here's the docs. You want to then take a step back once again and say, okay, I'm honored. I'd love to work with you. Let's do another meeting. I'd love to get your advice on these other things. I'd love to learn how you work with founders. I'd love to, have this discussion on what working together would look like. I ask for references. Say, hey, can I speak to a couple other founders you've worked with? So, when someone expresses interest, you don't
just automatically jump and say, here.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that probably feels like the biggest mistake that most people make, because you're in so much not desperate need, but you're in need of the funds. And so once you feel an inkling of somebody who's interested, it's like, I got to jump.
Become desperate.
Yeah.
You can't show the desperation, even if you are.
Yeah.
I've been desperate many times in my career, even beyond just our seed round.
Yeah.
But you can never show it, because this is what investors are. Their job is to sniff out desperation. Right? They're experts at this.
So they can get the best deal possible.
Exactly. So no matter what desperate situation you're in, you've got to come in with confidence. It's as simple as that. Most people won't give this advice, but it's just the truth.
Yeah. You said something important, even like you want them to be impressed by you. Now, when you're speaking in that language, are you talking about impressed with your knowledge of obviously the business for sure, but the overall sector that you're in, or just as the character of the person?
Predominantly, they're going to be investing in you, especially at the early stage.
Yeah.
Most good investors, if they're really impressed by a person, as long as the idea is decent, they'll bet on you, because they'll bet on your ability to pivot and evolve and come up with even better ideas. So first, they've got to be impressed by you. Now, the way you get them impressed by you is by how you speak about yourself and your company. And so you have to have really good answers to questions that they have about your company. You've had to have thought deeply about the company. You've had to have researched the space. When I talk about my business, I am able to talk about the business extremely well. I'm able to go super meta in terms of talking about where the business fits from a macro lens, in terms of how it plays into trends. I'm able to go very micro and talk about exactly how the product is going to work. I'm able to go horizontal and talk about competition and what this one's doing well but what they're not doing well, and what this other one is doing well that you want to integrate into this. And so I'm able to discuss, I'm able to talk very intelligently about what I'm building. And this is a reflection of how seriously, as a founder, I'm going to take my business.
So this is insightful, not even if you're just raising money, but just in general. Because like I said, if you're in sales, everybody's in sales in some capacity if you're in business.
Yep.
So when, like the deck, a lot of times people have on a deck, like how much money they're looking to raise, right? I'm looking to raise 10 million, 20 million. Is that the best way to go about it?
And generally speaking, I say for seed rounds, no deck.
No deck at all.
No deck at all. I've raised many of my rounds with no decks. Seed rounds predominantly, because if you haven't impressed the person enough on a relationship level and a conversational level with the business, it's very rare that they're going to look at a deck and be like, oh, this deck is amazing, I now want to invest. They're really making a decision on your relationship. Maybe you have a deck that you go through with them in person, right? Maybe you're talking to someone who's a little more traditional, really needs a deck. Fine, you can give them a deck. But generally speaking, I like to avoid a deck. Now, everything I'm saying is talking in terms of broad generalizations. Thousands of companies have raised off decks for a seed round. I'm just talking about my methodology, which I also know thousands of founders have used. And works far better than most methodologies that I've heard. Now, fundraising, there's the methodology and then there's the luck aspect. Some people get lucky. And for me, I've never really gotten just lucky. I've always followed a process. And the process has produced luck. I've had luck within the process, but I've never been one of those founders where someone just showed up and was like, I want to back you, or I had a really deep family relationship or something like that. I mean, a lot of my rounds that I've raised were just speaking to tons and tons of people using this process over and over again to generate, or effectively party rounds, where it's no one single person leading the round, where it's a bunch of people who get behind the round. Bolt was, I think, necessitated me getting very process-oriented at fundraising, because in Silicon Valley, there's a company that we're tangentially competitive to, which is called Stripe, and all the big VCs are in them, which means they're conflicted out of us. And so I couldn't get the big names, the Sequoia or the Andreessen Horowitz or Founders Fund. I couldn't get them to come into my company. And usually when these VCs, a big name like that comes in, they take most of the round, they put a big anchor check, and then it's the big VCs who provide most of the capital. For me, it was a lot of up-and-coming firms, angel investors, successful entrepreneurs. I had to raise party rounds in the early days. And so I think that just made me more systematic and thoughtful.
Yeah, you talked about the competition, which is interesting because not only do you have to know your business in and out, but you have to kind of know theirs to almost create a competitive moat to be in the space. Yeah. Right? So like you're doing this by yourself, right? At this point, there's no partner with you, right? It's just you?
I had a early co-founder who was with us for about 4 years. So I was involved in this early fundraising. We sparred a lot on this and traded notes and really played off each other super well. And then after they departed, then it was just me on all of my other rounds since then. I was always leading the fundraise. So, that's why I have a particular depth. And then I ended up writing a playbook.
I wanted to get to that. But I'm because I want people to really understand the amount of time that goes into this, the amount of sacrifice.
It's insane.
Right? Like, there's relationships that get sacrificed, friendships, all these sacrifices that no one sees on the front end, but like you're actually dealing with that on top of trying to create something that, again, is going to be a game changer.
Yeah, I mean, everything I'm describing took an extraordinary amount of time. I mean, Bolt's seed round probably spanned 3 years of doing small check after small check until we had enough traction to raise like an A round, which was a little bit bigger. And then our B and C and D round, we started to get institutional backers who would take big pieces of the round. But in the beginning, they were long drawn out. We're raising on SAFE, which is this instrument called a simple agreement for future equity, few page agreement that we were raising money onto. And, another thing that I did is everyone gets consumed with round size. What's the round size? For me, I've raised incrementally. So, for Bolt, initially I got once I started to realize the strategy, I got a few people to lean in. It was like, we're going to raise $1 million. That filled up pretty quickly. And then, we're like, yeah, might as well open another $1 million as more people became interested, or raise another $500,000. And then, when you say, oh, we're actually going to raise 2, we've already raised the 1. Now you're 50% complete. Versus, starting around saying I'm raising 2 million and I have none. Mm-hmm. Right? I'd rather start around and say, all right, I have a few people for leaning. They're probably good for $500,000. So we're going to raise $1 million or $750K. So the next person I go to, the round's almost done already. Versus how most founders start off, which is they go to someone and none of the round's done. If I'm going to talk to you about a round, it's going to be mostly done already. Before I'm like talking economics with you. Even those people who are forward leaning, I'm going to wait till a few others are forward leaning. And then I'm going to say, hey, we're doing $1 million, but I've got about 600 or 700 already circled up. You were one of my early conversations. I'm really excited to have you involved. Let's talk about formalizing your investment.
Good strategy.
So, and you've raised a lot of money, just to put it in context for people, because you're speaking from firsthand experience, right?
Yes.
So you talked about the time, but can you say how much time? Okay, for a founder that's looking to raise, what should they expect? They should expect to put 2 hours out of their day. They should expect to put 12 hours out of their day. What's a realistic expectation as far as the time commitment for a founder that is trying to raise money?
I mean, if you're trying to do it properly, it's 100% of your life.
That's the time frame.
That's the time commitment. And ideally you have a partner or a head of operations or a CTO that can hold over the fort.
That's running the business.
So
you should just be focused on, you can't split your time between running the business and raising money.
This is it.
This is it. I mean, once you get the hang of it and pass a critical threshold and you're cool to just take some checks casually here and there, once you're casual and you've already crossed the chasm, great. But until that point, you're 100%. Get someone else in your company. Give everyone a heads up that you're going to be off the grid for a bit. Fundraising. This is all you're focused on. 100% of the focus. And, spend a couple hours a day on the business. And so, a lot of people get nervous about fundraising purely because they're not focused on it. So it's never going to happen because this is a thing that requires such intense focus. You need to block off everything else in your life, spending 100% of your time on this thing. You need to go read my book. It's not something I did. This is a labor of love.
What's your book called?
It's called Fundraising by Ryan Breslow. Start off as a playbook that I wrote, a Google Doc that I gave to my friends. This is a labor of love. I had no time to write this book. But I made the time because founders needed this wisdom, because I saw too many making the same mistakes over and over again. And so you need to memorize this book, follow it to a T. You put your own style and flavor on it, of course, but really understand it and dedicate 100% of your time to this.
So while you're doing the fundraising and you're 100% dedicated to it, right before this, is this when you're creating the conscious culture playbook because you know that you're not going to be there on a day-to-day the way that you probably would be if you weren't trying to raise?
Yeah, so that came later for me, but I was creating a playbook on culture. I like systems scale. If your team doesn't know how it's going to operate, what it values, it's very hard to scale your company. And so I don't like repeating myself. I like methodology and formula, as you can tell, for things that I know work. And so I had a great CEO coach. His name is Matt Mochari. He's got a great book, Mochari Method, that everybody should read on CEOing. He gave me his method, which was my foundations of conscious culture. And then I made it my own. I mean, he taught it to me intensively for about 3 months. And then over the next 5 years, I kept the document being like, this is what works, this is what doesn't work for me. And so I created my own playbook. And then I ended up publishing that to the world on conscious.org, which we're redoing. We're going to relaunch. It's not where it needs to be right now. But, and this is the playbook we used to build and scale Bolt. And the conscious culture came from more of a spiritual aspiration to bridge humanity with execution. This is the marriage that I really wanted to facilitate, and I think conscious culture gets to that.
So we talked about raising money, but just business infrastructure, something else that I heard you say that was pretty insightful as far as you got to be careful with partnerships, right? And a lot of businesses have partners. You have a philosophy that's not always the best way to go about it, right?
Yeah. So there's the traditional advice on starting a company is find a co-founder. I give the opposite advice. I say don't find a co-founder unless you know you're ready to marry somebody. Because this is a marriage. This is even more significant in your marriage. You could have this relationship for the next 30 years, for the rest of your life. This is going to define the success of your business. It can also ruin your business. It could ruin your life. This is the most important decision that you're making. For me, I prefer this concept of a founding role. So a founding CTO, a founding COO, a founding head of operations, where you've made some progress enough to recruit someone exceptional to take a founding X role. It's different than co-founder. A co-founder implies a double-digit percentage of your company that you're sharing with that person. A founding role may be single digits. It may be mid-single digits. It could be considerable percentage of your company, but it at least lets you hedge your bets. Or not, it protects you because they're probably not on the board initially. They don't have voting control of your company. So effectively, they're fireable. They're on a vesting schedule, which means if you fire them early, they don't get all of their equity. And so I would highly recommend this strategy as the safest strategy. And you can always give that person more, right? If you give them 5% of your company, well, you can always raise it to 10 and then to 15 and 20. But it's very hard to take out a co-founder. They have rights. They could sue you. You've given a big chunk of the company. You may have wrestled for voting control. So this is a much safer path.
Yeah, could you break down, because even the vesting thing is, when I was hearing you talk about it, I'm like, that's pretty brilliant, right? Like you offer equity, low digits, maybe it's anywhere between, would you say anywhere between 1 to 5%, or would you even go higher?
It entirely is dependent on the person, their experience, how much they typically get paid, their role, how exceptional they are.
Yeah, but by vesting
1 to 5 is a range that I would recommend for an exceptional founding role.
Right, but they don't get the 5. It has to be worked out where if they're there for a certain amount of time, then it's earned, correct?
Yeah, standard is 4 years. Sometimes I do 5 years. There's a 1 year cliff, meaning if they don't make it till at least a year, they don't get anything. It's typically a very bad practice to fire them on month 11. If you fire them on month 11, give them 11 months worth. You sign off the paperwork. But if they don't make it past 6 months, they typically don't deserve anything because they weren't a good enough fit. But if they make it past 6 months, you should give them, even though you don't have to until a year, should give them what they earned proportionally. And then, they earn, typically it's a monthly vest. So
do you find that, I mean, obviously you're hiring these people because you see something in them, but do you see the return is that the dedication to the company has changed because of the equity that can be gained if they potentially obviously outworked what you saw in them, but long term what this company can potentially be?
Yeah. I generally like to give people lower salary, higher equity, make sure they're owners in this thing with me. There's some exceptions to that rule, but you want missionaries, not mercenaries. You want someone who's all in, behind the purpose, behind you, who believes. You need believers in order to build something from scratch. It's just too hard to hire mercenaries who are just doing it to get paid. Building a startup is too hard. Someone who's just doing it to get paid, even if they're one of your employees, it's just they're not going to put in the work required to help make you successful.
So debt equity, that's an interesting term. What does that mean?
So dead, yeah. Debt equity is equity you've mismanaged, meaning you've given it to somebody who is of no longer of value to your business. And so if you pick the wrong co-founder and they don't do anything, well, now all of their equity is debt equity. Debt equity will destroy your business. The number one thing you need to be striving for is fairness across the cap table that is directly tied to value in the business. And so fairness is a topic that is also rarely discussed, but it's very important. Meaning, if you have an A player who has this much equity and they're sitting next to a B player with the same amount of equity, they're going to be like...
It's demoralizing.
Demoralizing. They're not going to work as hard. You want your A player to be all in. And so even if they don't have transparency into the cap table, people whisper and people talk. And they share notes and they share their information. So they'll find out. You hope they don't find out, but you have to expect that everyone will find out. And you have to have a cap table, even if you don't share it with the team, which you shouldn't because it creates too much controversy. But if it was to be shared, you can stand behind it. This sense of fairness is everything. There's a great sales adage, which is feed your eagles, starve your turkeys. So your A players, roll out the red carpet for your A players. Be very generous with them. And B players, you got to get rid of them. You don't have the capacity at a startup to have B players around. That's what other corporations are for, right? That's what those jobs are for. When you're trying to build something from nothing, it is so hard. It takes such exceptional ability and effort that you're not in the charity business of job creation. You can do that later when you're thousands of people, but there's no charity seat on your team when you're trying to create something out of nothing.
No, that's a fact.
That's a big fact. You mentioned the cap table, and so kind of twofold question: how do you vet? I mean, in the early days and now, how do you go about vetting who belongs and how many people are going to be on the cap table? And then the other part is the board, right? Because most people are not even familiar with what that process is and how many people you should have, the different roles of the board members. Give a little bit of information about that.
Board is the governing body of your company. It's where votes take place on important corporate decisions. Do we create more option pool? Do we approve this round of funding? Do we take on this new capital? All the board makes those decisions. How much budget do we spend every year? The board is very important from a governance standpoint, but if you set it up wrong, it could destroy your business. Because if you have the wrong people on there who are outvoting you as the founder, who don't have the context, who aren't in the trenches day in and day out, your business is screwed. And so I believe in founder-led boards. I believe that founders, a lot of the great companies have, initially founder-led boards that eventually have some diversification on it. But the simplest way to set up a board is you as a founder, it's just you. Don't be putting anyone on your board. I don't care how much of a hotshot they are, how big their name is. There's no quicker way to destroy your business than putting somebody with a pedigree on your board too early. Because now that person has more gravitas than you. And they have ego, typically. I'm making generalizations. Mm-hmm. But I've seen this happen far too many times. And so you got to keep things tight in the beginning because you have a vision that is very hard for others to see. And you've got to have ball control to get this to a pretty substantial place before you start to mature.
What about like taking money? Like a lot of times people don't realize like if you take money too early out of a company, it could ruin the company, right? Like, what's your advice for founders but it's still difficult because you still have to eat and you still have to provide for yourself, or if you have a family, you got to provide for your family too. So how do you balance that reinvesting money in the company to grow it, but still kind of maintaining your life as well?
You as a founder, you're going to become an expert at balancing and juggling many things in your life. I wish that someone taught me the importance of health early on. I didn't know the first thing about health. So I was, nowadays I focus deeply on health, family, friendships, my nonprofit work, business. I'm able to balance. In the beginning, I had no balance. I mean, I was just abusing my body to just crank on the business. To some degree, that is necessary. And on the other hand, if I were to go back to my younger self, I would say focus on some of these other things too. But generally speaking, yeah, to create something from nothing, which we've all done here, we know the sacrifice required. It's an extraordinary level of sacrifice, and there's really no way around that.
Well, let's get to where we left off in Davos. You were super excited, and you were telling me about the one thing that the world needs. And I told you love. And you're like, exactly. And I was like, you were like, when you hear it, what do you think? I'm like, it's the universal language. It's what gets everybody through any part of their life. And you're like, yeah. And then you were about to go into this. I said, all right, save it. We got to sit down and record it. So talk to us about love, its mission, and how you got to this point.
So I have been on my own spiritual journey, health, family, different communities that I'm involved in. And the last 3 years, I say that's become a bigger part of my life, what I call spirituality broadly. And what I've learned is that there are a lot of problems we have in the world today that the many of us are, that our government, our society, our corporations are largely ignoring. 130 million Americans are chronically ill. A massive chunk of those have 2 or more chronic illness. I think it's like 50 million have 4 or more, 30 million have 5 or more. We're sicker than ever before. If you go and look at the charts around Crohn's disease, celiac, autism, Parkinson's, diabetes, they're through the roof. So 1 in 30 kids are being born with autism. These days it used to be 1 in 30,000. On the flip side, our planet is getting destroyed. $45 trillion, I think I saw a stat recently. $45 trillion of our global annual GDP is made in an unsustainable way, meaning it's extracted from nature. So, what this wall is made out of, and that lamp, and this microphone, and this table all came from nature. It came from somewhere that was once natural habitat with animals and insects and all this gorgeous nature, and that was ripped apart to put these things here, our couches, everything, right? And so we're taking from nature, nature's getting destroyed. We're using very harmful chemicals in all of our products, our soaps, our shampoos, our toothpaste, our laundry detergent, our linens, the furniture, the toxins that are emitted as fumes into our households. We're breathing in all day, or getting absorbed into our skin and our blood all day, which is creating the sickness. So I became, frankly, petrified about where our planet is heading. And so I asked the question, I was like, how do we solve these gargantuan problems? And I realized that nothing is going to change until we change where our money goes. Where money goes is where energy flows. So if they say you vote once every 4 years for your president, well, you're voting every single day for what corporations you support and what practices you support. So if you're trying to vote good in politics, but every day you're buying things on Amazon that are made for chemicals that are bad for your health, that are bad for the planet, that's destroying the planet, that's eviscerating small businesses who try to innovate and get ripped off, which is what's happening with most of our dollars. Horrible work conditions. We're voting for all these things every single day. And so we wonder why the world is in such a bad shape. When we're voting for these horrible things, we're voting for illness, destruction of nature, horrible work conditions, and evisceration of small business. We're voting for that every day when we shop. And we wonder why these problems exist. So I had this crazy idea of building an inverted Amazon, where instead of it's the cheapest, lowest cost, suppliers, it thought we're not going to make it more expensive. We're going to prioritize small businesses. Instead of ripping off the small businesses, we're going to prioritize small businesses. Instead of letting anything on the store, we're going to let only products that pass our standards around chemicals, toxins. We're going to do the homework on behalf of consumers, and we're going to look at sustainability. And so we're going to hold high standards and build a new everything store. We call it the Clean Green Everything Store, which is love.com. When you think of the name love.com, it's where love meets commerce. And so this is the bridge that we're building. And I'm sorry if I'm talking a little too long. I'll just finish. For consumers, where today it's way too hard. Let's say you want to vote with your dollars and vote for better values. Well, if you're going to search non-toxic deodorant or sustainable furniture, it's too much work. Like Google search and find the brands, research the brand, separate sites, separate shopping experiences. One-stop shop with love.com. You can search for anything, and everything you find is past a certain threshold of our love standards, and is generally speaking good for your body, good for the planet, good for small business.
So it's all, is there a name for that? Like environmental friendly? What's the name? Like, is there like just...
We're calling it the Clean Green Everything Store.
So anything in society that you want, but done ethically.
Yeah. Made with love. All products that are made with love are made ethically. Now, not everything is perfect. We have a page that describes our standards. Not everything is perfectly sustainable or perfectly organic, but it has enough. The businesses are trying hard enough where we say, all right, they're trying hard enough. They've done enough things where it's past our standards and they can make it on the love marketplace.
So this is like Amazon for companies that operate at the highest ethical level.
Exactly. And to give the ethical consumers the same shopping experience as Amazon. Because right now they have to spend way too much time shopping, discovering, research. Now they have one place to go for everything they need to purchase.
Focusing on small businesses specifically.
Yep. 95+% of the brands and products on our site are made by small businesses.
And it's everything from clothing to groceries.
Yeah, clothing, groceries, bedding, beauty, bath, baby. We have over 10,000 SKUs on the site now. We want to be at 30,000 by end of this month, 60,000 by the following month. So we're sourcing products morning till night. Yeah, super excited about it.
I think the first thing we laughed about, I'm like, Love Duck, you trademarked that? I'm like, how did you get Love Duck? Nobody had that? And then I was like, okay. I first thought maybe you said you wanted to solve something in the world. And you said, what's the number one thing that affects our world? And we left there, and when I left, I'm like, oh, it must be talking about health. But the health of the environment, the health of the world, really, in a sense. So you have Bolt and you have Love.com. Is this now all the practices that you've learned, you're now implementing them in real time, and I'm doing this again. I can do it again.
Exactly, because with Bolt, we're giving every shop the Amazon one-click experience. So we have some great customers like Revolve, Fanatics, Casper, Saxoff Fifth, who now when you go and you shop there, you have this incredible one-click Amazon one-click experience that's powered by Bolt. So I've been spending the last 10 years building, streamlining commerce experience.
Who are your other clients? Because everything you just said, I've shopped in the last month, and I didn't even have any idea. But
really?
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, see, it works in this kind of magical way where we're not like a PayPal or an Apple Pay or Google Pay where the button is front and center, it redirects you somewhere else. Mm. It's just native on the site. So if you start typing in your email and we have your account, we'll be like, hey, you already have an account, enter a one-time code, send to your phone, you enter a one-time code, all of your information's preloaded, and then you click pay. And so Bolt, as opposed to these other wallets, is embedded and native to the merchant site. That's our unique innovation. And so, yeah, we've got hundreds and hundreds of retailers. Bolt is, God willing, going to have a breakout year this year. We're signing major brands as the ones I've listed and many others. And there's a domino effect of retailers. We've got 80 million shoppers on the network now, which is massive. 2 years ago, I think it was like 11 or 12 million shoppers on our network. So the network is expanding rapidly. The goal with Bolt is to let everyone build their own have their own Amazon one-click checkout experience where there's no different shopping from Revolve to Casper to Amazon.
So are you now splitting the time on the how do you balance in that?
So I'm very lucky. I've got a CEO named Maju and a president named Cal, who are very senior executives at Amazon. Think of them as like unhirable executives. Cal is an SVP at Amazon, reported directly from Bezos, was CEO of drugstore.com, had Bezos on his board. Maju ran all global logistics at Amazon, domestic and international. So their toughest business unit, arguably, that they put like their best executive into, that was Maju. So Maju and Cal basically run circles around me at the higher stages of scaling. So I'm chairman of Bolt, but I'm not CEO, I'm not president, I'm not operating day to day. I check in with them regularly. We do board meetings. I get updates constantly. And I'm kind of actively overseeing as a chairman. And then Love, I'm the CEO. So I'm doing one-on-ones with the team every day. I'm running, I'm spending morning till night on. So Love is my main operational focus.
But a few questions. So yeah, how did you trademark Love? Can you trademark Love?
You can trademark it in certain classifications. So we can use Love in certain capacities and more to come as we're applying for it. But it's an interesting question, right? Can you actually trademark love? We actually had some companies who were also named Love who tried to challenge us on this and say, "Oh, you can't use love. We're already using it." We worked out some settlements with them to say, "Hey, we won't use it in these categories for this amount of time." But it is a interesting question. Can you actually trademark love? What matters to me is I had to have love.com. So
you had to pay for that though.
we had to pay up
A
for
lot,
that.
a lot of
It was that. That
We
was
had to pay
yeah.
up for that.
That domain name.
I know that somebody had it already.
Yeah, Yahoo had it.
Oh, Yahoo had
Oh
it?
man.
Yeah.
What? Oh man. Yeah. That's a.
Was it an active site or they just was?
No, they weren't using it. There were some old Yahoo email addresses where you could choose love as your, and like they had Yahoo and a million other Bell South, all these options, right? You could choose love.com as one of your options, as your extension, but they had mostly stopped using it. And so when I found out they owned it, I was like, this is good news and bad news. The good news is they're kind of, I think they're run by this group, Apollo Group, and there's very financially minded folks, which means they're not planning on doing anything creative with it, right? It's just a private equity operation. So I was like, all right, well, they might actually be willing to sell it. They're just going to charge a high price. That's exactly what happened.
That's the bad news.
That's the bad news. Yeah, exactly.
So you built Bolt up. What's Bolt's valuation now?
Well, our last investor round was our Series Z round. It was about 2 years ago, and that was an 11 billion valuation.
I was gonna say.
So you built Bolt up, 11 billion valuation. That's up and running. You stepped away in the sorts because you have management team that's running the company. You're not running it, and now you're focusing on love, right? That's your new. So what's the brain process of building something that's, very few people are going to reach that level of success with one company, right? And then now you have to go and start the process all over again, right? It's a lot of work. Now you kind of back to day one not back to day one as far as resources, but back to day one as far as doing the work. What's the thought process? Because a lot of people would think, if I've reached that level of success, then I'll just ride it out until I sell the company or take it public or just whatever,
And can we add that, you're not even in, I guess, a prime of life yet, right? Like you're not 35 yet. Like when most people reach millionaire status, it's that they hit that, it's around that time. Or they have the creative idea to do it. So it's, again?
Yeah. Sometimes I wonder what got into me. It's a crazy idea that I just can't get out of my head, this idea for love.com. And I say I was very blessed. The universe blessed me because this wasn't the plan. I was going to operate Bolt till the end of time. And my COO was Maju. One of my biggest hires was Maju as my COO and CTO. But then more and more people I wanted to report into him. He was so good. I was just like, all right, well, you can take customer success. All right, you can take engineering. All right, you can take finance. All right, you can take legal. All right, well, I kind of just want to have the whole company report into you because you're so much better at managing than I am. And then I'm like, Maju, you're basically running the company. I should just help empower you and unleash the beast because he's a beast. And you step into CEO and I'll be chairman and I'll open doors for customers. I'll help with raises. I'll help accelerate things. And I'm going to go work on some other ideas at the same time. And then Maju hired Cal. And then, now these guys are ripping. And so I got lucky, very, very lucky. This wasn't the plan at all.
So what about the crypto savings?
Yeah, so Eco is a whole separate story, but I basically didn't want my crypto ideas around ease of use in crypto to have to wait or to die. So in parallel, I got some friends together and I said, let's do this thing. It was originally called Beam. And then we had one of the founders of Uber, the original founder, Garrett Camp, was working on something called Eco. And we decided to join forces, and he'd give us the brand. We'd give him some piece of what we were doing. So it became Eco. It's a much longer story, but it's run by one of my closest friends in the world named Andy Bromberg, who's a Stanford friend of mine, also in the Stanford Bitcoin group. So I ran it with a few other friends in the beginning. Andy then joined a few years in, took over as CEO. So there's about 5 of us as co-founders there. I originated it, but these guys get all the credit. I kind of got it going. It was a ton of work. And but yeah, they have a wallet called Beam. Beam is like Venmo, but on chain. So it's the easiest way to use crypto on the chain versus Coinbase, which is off chain. And they have a currency called Ecocurrency, which is super cool. It's like a semi-stable coin. There's a panel of economists who vote on the monetary policy. So it's kind of it's a decentralized governance around inflation of the coin and all of this. So it's an amazing project, and I think is going to have some big years coming up.
You started the Bitcoin board in 2013. I wonder what your thoughts around the space as you watch, most recently, the Bitcoin ETF get passed, but and that, just the hype around it, knowing that in 2013 you were trying to convince people that this is the thing of the future. You're going to financial institutions. They're probably like, kid, get out of here. You know what I'm talking about? And now here we are, regulation, ETFs. What was going through your mind during that time?
Well, in 2013, I remember we had a dinner, and or maybe it's 2014, and a bunch of people asked where I think Bitcoin will be in a decade. And I said, and at the time it was maybe tens of dollars. And I said, I think it's going to be $100,000 a coin. And it's kind of been tracking to that almost exactly to the decade. So it's not quite there yet, but it's getting pretty close. And so, I mean, it's been an amazing journey. I think we saw in the beginning merchant adoption we thought was going to be the big thing. Then that didn't have a lot of volume. Then there's a second wave of merchant adoption. It started to get some volume. We now have obviously ordinals on Bitcoin. We have Ethereum, which is doing remarkably well, which provides all this new functionality on top of the chain. I think ETFs are huge because the number one value prop of Bitcoin and crypto is being able to store it yourself. But the reality is not everybody wants to. So just to have a financially regulated security that you can buy that gives you exposure for 90% of people who don't want to manage a wallet off chain or on chain is massive. It's beyond massive.
That's like I can imagine how surreal it is as as somebody who was trying to build a wallet so that people could simplify and have their crypto coin, Bitcoin stored, to now saying, all right, well, there's an ETF. Here you go.
It's a dream come true. It's incredible. So
you also champion a 4-day work week, right?
Yep.
So talk about that.
So what I've realized is that we have a big problem in the typical workplace, which is that most of corporate America, at least what I've seen, is that everyone is perpetually exhausted. And so they're working 5 days a week. They're in a bunch of monotonous meetings. They're doing work they're not even sure is important. they have to catch up on work on the weekends while they take care of their families, and no one can ever catch up. And so 4-day work week is tied in with a few concepts, but the underpinning is that I've tried to figure out in my companies is how to eliminate what I call work theater. And this is a phrase that most of the things I talk about I've used from others. This is a phrase that I coined, work theater. Most of the work that people do doesn't matter. I'd say 90% is work theater, meaning it's work that just looks good, but doesn't actually accomplish anything. Right? And so people are working so much, they're so exhausted, and they're getting nothing done for the company because they're consumed with red tape and bureaucracy. And so what I found is by shortening the work week and saying, no, you don't have 5 days to get everything done. You've got 4 days to get everything done. You can't schedule meetings Friday through Sunday. You need to expect people are going to be off. In these 4 days, you're going to be present, focused. This I took from Twitter. It's not mine. It's called work like a lion, not like a cow. Right? I want my team to come in and work like lions for 4 days as much as they can. And then I want them to go relax, be with their family, be with their friends, enjoy life, heal, so that they can come and work like lions. I think as human beings, we're supposed to go hunt, and then we're supposed to go relax. We spend too much time in this middle ground. So to me, I found much more productivity when we have these intense spurts of hunting, and then people have their own lives.
So all your employees work for 4 days?
Yes and no. We try to adhere to it with love. With Bolt, it's been experiments. So Bolt has it rolled out, but Bolt is later stage. Could maybe afford to do it a little bit more. Love, we're trying to do it, but we still end up working a lot of Fridays. So I can't say fully that we're doing it with love right now, but we're trying. We're being mindful of it,
and you champion remote work, right?
Yeah, all my companies are 100% remote. I never want to go back to an office again. And that's just a personal choice that I made. And now they're hubs. So some folks, there's a cluster in San Francisco or a cluster in New York or a cluster in LA, and they meet up. They may have shared workspaces. So there's certain clusters that like to come together into my various companies and work. Prism, another one of my companies, has a bona fide office. But they have a pretty kind of hardcore sales culture, and it fits them. So, one of my companies does have a bona fide office, but it's not something that I'm married to at all, and I typically prefer remote.
So Bolt has 800 employees?
No, Bolt has gone down by quite a bit. We've just realized that with our narrow focus on going after the world's largest customers, we didn't need as many people and many headcounts. So we actually completely removed our focus on SMB, just small to medium-sized businesses, to focus on big accounts. So we brought the company now, it's below 200.
200. And how many you add Love?
About 15.
Right. And so you have that, but you also have the nonprofit work.
Yes.
And I know that's very important to you. Talk about that.
I believe that spiritually we're supposed to give at least 10%, if not 20% of what you make back. This is my fundamental belief. I believe if you don't do that, you're hurting yourself because you're creating karma. And so selfishly, I want to stay healthy. I want to stay safe. I want my businesses to be successful. So I try to give back as much as I can because I know spiritually you have to. It's not, a lot of people say, oh, we're going to wait until later in life. That's a prudent thing to do. I don't believe in that at all. I think you have to always be giving back to the community. It has to become a muscle that becomes ingrained in you. So I have a few different impact-related initiatives. My most prominent nonprofit is called The Movement. So dance has completely changed my life. It was a healthy outlet for me that got me through many tough times in a very healthy way. And so I realized that dancing is one of the most scalable ways to spread happiness and mental health. Because all you need is a floor and a speaker. So if you're going to try to solve a mental health crisis at a homeless shelter, refugee camp, it's very difficult. You have to hire, if you're going to have to hire psychiatrists, it's one-on-one, they're hundreds of dollars per hour. Other methodologies are not very scalable, very expensive. Dance, you need a floor and a speaker. And so we did some work with some homeless shelters, some disabled centers, after school programs. And then we realized that we can go do refugee camps where there's hundreds of thousands of people who are suffering. So we've picked one of the largest in Africa called Bidi Bidi, and 250,000 refugees in Uganda. They have a massive suicide crisis, a massive mental health crisis. I think it's something like 30 or 40% of the residents that say are depressed. Is like a 10% annual suicide rate. Don't quote me on that, but I mean, it's those proportions. And a lot of the folks there have nothing to live for. And so the goal is to give them something to live for that we could afford. So we partnered with another nonprofit who created this stage, it's like performance stage. And we do the programming, dance programming. And we have people coming say, this is what they now live for. This has changed their life. They didn't take their life because of this. I mean, it's flourishing. And we did almost nothing. We created some curriculum. We trained some people on the ground. We're not fishing for them. We don't hire people to go out and teach. There's thousands of incredible dancers already as refugees. So we just put a little program together, and they've taken the ball and they run with it. Now we go back every 6 months, check in, help give them advice on how to manage the program. So now I want to scale this to shelters, homeless, refugee, schools. This is my biggest passion for charity.
Well, Ryan, that was extremely insightful conversation for sure. Any last words you want to leave the audience with?
Well, once again, so honored to be here. So grateful that we're doing this after giving our talk. I know we've all three of us have been through similar journeys. So you guys have built such an incredible platform that's lifting others up. Too many of us become successful and we don't share the secrets. We don't build the bridges. I know a lot of folks who want to burn the bridges to get to where they are, right? And so I think you guys are building tons of bridges and just excited to build some great bridges and share some great knowledge with you guys.
No, I appreciate it, my brother. Thank you. Like I said, it was extremely insightful. So thank you for taking the time out of your schedule. I know you got a lot going on. And I look forward to, doing some other stuff with you in the future.
Yeah, likewise.
All right, guys. Thank you for rocking with us. We'll see you next week. Peace.
Peace. Love.